Now, next is we are entering into a Q&A session, and we are going to start with Steve Bradford and Dragos. This was a very educative and informative session, I must say. And many of us have definitely gone with a basket of knowledge and a lot of information in this new technology. Now, both Steve and Dragos, for you, what is the role of ICAO in ensuring a global approach to higher airspace operations? Other panel members should also be able to chip in. But Steve Bradford, please go ahead.
Okay, so in fact, there was a question on the questions that kind of leads to the same thing. It's important for ICAO to help sponsor and support our interactions. Someone noted that the FAA's charts for our directed tabletops in our conversations, we only included operators and US entities. And that's because we have limitations on how we can meet with international people when the FAA is facilitating a meeting. We have met with the operators in other forums in which there are many international partners. We also are in the middle of negotiating a new research program with SESAR, in which our Upper E and the ECHO programs will start to work. But those are all bilateral, and they're not all encompassing. So it's really important that ICAO sponsor this, provides a forum for us to interact with each other, participate as more than subject matter experts, because many of us have limitations on how we can directly interact outside of an international forum. And it's important because this has to be international.
Well said. Dragos, what's your comment on that one?
Thank you, Silas. Thank you, Steve. I've also picked up the questions asked on the Q&A, and it's quite clear that we will be dealing for new entrants with some fundamental elements of the ATM system. Think classes of airspace, think flight rules, and I don't think that conversation can happen anywhere but through ICAO. And obviously, if we want this industry to be able to operate globally, the rules need to be defined at global level. I think this is a must-have solution, and the more we will be dealing with finding the properties of solutions that are acceptable also for traditional aviation, we will find that current setups and current solutions may and should be improved. Thank you.
Perfect. Dragos, while you still have the mic, how important is the airspace organization for seamless global operations?
I think this is key, and I speak from European experience where we've understood the added benefit of not having the airspace fragmented. I think we're looking to understand what it is the best optimum solution that could be applied over a region. And we see that airspace organization is the key that we have to focus on. Think also about the link between spectrum protection for radio frequencies and the way we define airspace volumes. And there's a direct connection there that we need to be very mindful of. And I come back again to the type of services that we provide and we intend to provide. Some of this may not yet be defined, and we need to be very mindful that state sovereignty and provision of services need to go hand in hand for this. And I see airspace organization as a key direction for the rest of the community, mindful of the fact that in some regions we would not have big volumes of airspace, but we would have to deal with cross-border situation. And therefore, I think it's important to explore this type of discussions at global level. Thank you.
Now, my next question is directed to all the panelists. Will all the panelists please turn on their camera? And the question is, can the traffic management solution for higher airspace operations be an incubator for ATM? Whoever is free to respond to this. Can the traffic management solution for higher airspace operations be an incubator for ATM?
Yeah, if I may, this is David. Thanks for the question. I think one of the wonderful things about aviation, and I think FAA really does a wonderful job of typifying this behavior, same with EASA and Eurocontrol, is that we learn from every input to the aviation ecosystem. There is something that can be taken from every effort, whether it's in the negative or in the positive, and adopted in a manner that is helpful, not just to the operators, but to the ANSPs and to the world around us. So yes, I think that any learnings we get from high altitude traffic management solutions can be applied more broadly, even beyond just that ecosystem, in the same way that a lot of what we have proposed is based off learnings that we saw in UTM and integrates standard air traffic procedures that we see in positive controlled airspace as well. So yeah, absolutely. I think that is the standard that aviation ecosystem has utilized for decades now to great success.
Excellent. Now, Mark, what is the business economic case for hypersonic vehicles in the higher airspace?
Yes, Silas. Maybe we have to remember that before COVID, the air transportation was somewhere more than 600 billion per year business, and growing at 8% business per year. So we really believe that being able to move 20 times faster in a carbon-free mode with hydrogen, for example, with green hydrogen, should attract some passengers. Just a few of them will be enough to make the business model. And we really believe that flying daily over the dense airspace in a safe space plane using hydrogen rocket propulsion is an experience that we really wish it to the next generation. The people born in the beginning of 2000 should live that. And let us remember that we need air to sustain ourselves in aviation. But then after that, the speed is really a bargain if you want to go very, very fast in air. So going over and surfing is just like hydrofoils or something like this. You go above, then you have no more drag, and then you can reach speed which are about Mach 25 when you re-enter into the atmosphere, and then you use once again air in order to be safe and to be able to land without being obliged to have a retro rocket, things like this, because we see today that for launchers there are solutions. But frankly talking, we don't believe that it will be safe enough to transport people with the same level of security that what we have today in aviation.
Perfect. Back to you, Mr. Dragos. How do we ensure that higher airspace operations do not have a disproportionate impact on operations in the airspace below?
I think it starts with proper planning. Obviously, we consider that these operations need to be part of the larger picture we have on the entire European ATM network. We have quite clear metrics for defining what performance of that network is, and therefore we understand what the various elements impact on each other is. And once we will have included new entrants as part of the regular planning, and we would have included them in the processes that we have designed for managing the network, then it's obviously easy to identify the delta and maintain that particular impact to a proportionate measure. The other remark I would like to make is that we need to make sure that we foster innovation and we allow this industry to grow. So I think there is a dynamic relationship. We need to make sure that everyone has access in a fair and transparent manner to network resources. We have transponder codes, frequencies, airspace identified as resources that we need to share. And obviously the criteria upon which these are fair and equitably shared, it's something that needs to be discussed by industry and regulators as a community. Thank you.
David, this is to you. How can one ensure innovation is used to support a future in which all users have access to critical ATM resources?
Who was that to?
That is directed to David, but whoever is willing to respond to
Dave.
it.
That's what I thought. I thought it was David, but I'll go ahead, David.
Is
Yes,
it
go ahead.
this David or David Batchelor? I think me.
Yeah, David Batchelor is our
David Hansler,
our
yes.
facilitator.
David
That's you.
Batchelor. Okay. Yeah, equitable access is a key underpinning of the utilization of this, shared yet limited international resource. And equity access to that airspace has been and continues to be the foundation of rulemaking. It's the foundation of ATC operations around the world. And it is really critical to ensuring that it's critical both from the operator's perspective and what I've seen from regulators and ANSPs that we are constantly considering how is this being done in an equitable fashion. And I think when you go into the effort with that as a foundational sort of pillar of your approach to airspace access, you're guaranteeing that on the back end. I also think that at what we've seen in the past, particularly the past 5 years, as we've been developing regulatory approaches and partnering to develop an approach to the concept of operations, all the operators and manufacturers in this space, we've all approached this from like, this has to be equitable. We all have to have equitable access to this. And as long as you have the technical acumen to operate in this airspace, you should be entitled to that equitable access. And ideally what that yields then is equitable access to the users who are utilizing the services of those vehicles, whether that's supersonic aircraft, whether that is communications balloons, or surveillance that government can use to look for fires around the world. We think that pillar approach sort of guarantees that for all the users, including ANSPs, the folks on the ground, and the operators themselves.
So can I answer that too?
Please go ahead.
So let me take it a little bit different approach on that one. Equitable access says that there's lots of access that we just need to make sure that it's passed out appropriately. If we don't do something like this, and we continue to use our techniques that we use at these highest altitudes, the typical ATC construct, we require a lot more airspace for each operation. So equitable access ends up being, how am I going to ration the airspace that I've divvied up for individual operations because I'm using the traditional methods. This whole goal here is to provide an ecosystem in which these vehicles can actually fly much closer together because they are cooperatively separating. They actually open up more capacity. And then we just have to make sure the equitable is one of these operators figuring out ways to disadvantage another operator. But without an ETM or an ECHO or something else, we'll be talking about how do we do demand capacity balancing on a scarce resource, because our current operations require lots and lots of airspace, lots of buffers, and eat up the capacity.
Well done, excellent. So, Paulo, in the experience of Peru, what measures have been implemented to ensure the safety of air operations in the event of unplanned down a balloon?
Okay, thanks, Silas, for the question. In Peru, actually, in response to LUN's requirements to be able to operate in the Peruvian airspace, our main objective is in the air navigation service was to ensure the safety for air operations and for the balloon, obviously. In that sense, it was coordinated with LUN personnel so the balloons keep their transponder active and fly at flight levels above 60,000 feet in order to avoid possible effects on air traffic management. Additionally, there are events of the balloons which were evaluated between the parties, LUN and air traffic service provider. And of the result that we have is the letter of agreement between CORPAC and LUN, which clearly establishes the actions to be followed in a schedule or an unscheduled descent, always ensuring the safety of operations. In summary, before the balloon operations, the necessary arrangements were made so that their operation does not affect the safety. And since 2016, the descents that we have always been carried out in compliance with the letter of agreement without any inconvenience.
Excellent, excellent. So, Mark, what are the potential showstoppers of hypersonic developments using higher airspace?
I think that the first one come from the fact that at this speed, the traffic will be inevitably international. There is no interest to go so fast if you don't go far. So it means that we will have first to face the need to share the vision and to share the rules and to have somewhere common regulations, which can be made of law and made of usage, and clearly an harmonized air traffic management at the international level is a key enabler. And very probably it's the one which need to be started from now and with a sound exchange of vision in order to be sure that there is a common interest to succeed. And the second is directly linked to the high level of energy and complexity, which are very high because, of course, we are not talking of vehicles which are very light and very small. And there, we believe on our side, being myself, I've been working both for rockets and for aircraft, and we believe that we must avoid that some kind of crazy rocket dreamers. I'm not talking the real one, but there are a lot of things that we see people making some advertising on some possibilities, and we are afraid that they can jeopardize the business, taking too much risk and put at risk globally the air traffic. So for this, there is a set of industrialists. We believe that the safe hypersonic space planes will rather be planes coming from the aeronautical background and legacy, using, of course, rather than the reverse. We don't believe that industries that are making launchers will be able to go from the today. It's a pity, but you have to remember that the space shuttle, which was a marvelous vehicle, has a rate of lethality which is very, very high, 1%. So of course, it's very, very difficult to come from rockets to go to the level of security, safety, and which is the one we need to have a fair business like in commercial air transportation today. So at the end, those two drivers. One is sharing the rules, and the second one is achieving the correct architecture in order to be sure that the customers will want to fly in the craft.
Oh, perfect. So this one is an open question to all the panelists, whoever grabs it first. What would be critical interfaces with non-aviation actors like space agencies, the militaries that you foresee? Whoever is willing to grab this question.
Maybe I can keep just just to say that probably legal matter will be a major driver. So we have really to embark with us all the legal people that can help to pave the way for the framework that will be needed in order to define how to use this new volume, which is the space. I mean, the in-between airspace and space.
Okay. Any other comment from any of the panelists on this question? Looks like we are running out of time.
Can I add to that, Silas? I think it's a crucial part of our analysis because, and you'll have seen on the chat, contingency management is crucial to ensure that these operations can grow. And we're looking at new type of operations, at least in Europe, when we're looking at launches from Europe, and our interfaces with the space agencies will be required to make sure that we cover all contingency scenarios. Now we're looking at colleagues over the Atlantic who've had experience and have set up a particular way of interacting. And we understand that we need to have more direct communication and real operational exchanges as opposed to strategic and then perhaps pre-tactical exchanges that we've had so far. So to me, that's one of the key areas that we would need to account for. And on the military side, I think the air defense and security aspects need not be overlooked. Obviously, when we look at the type of operations, there are new scenarios that need to be accounted for. And all of this will have an impact on how we assign resources and how we interface with colleagues that may be cross-border. And therefore, at least in ECHO, we're looking at this as something that needs to have a solution that's driven by international regulation as well, because we would not simply be in a position to apply a single state rules, not in the European context. Thank you.
Great. Steve, the discussion is taking us towards desired international coordination. So there is a need for international coordination and combined effort to support future operations. What plans do you have, and how will your organization initiate that effort?
So we want to enter into bilaterals. Using our bilaterals, we want to enter into negotiations. We also were working through other international organizations, like we work with AIA, and through that ICC AIA, where industry can come together to help. We use whatever mechanism we can to try to engage. So, like I said, we're going to include this in the SESAR joint undertaking, next work package. We stand ready to attend and support other international forums for which we have agreements in order to work this forward. But a more holistic framework in which we can all engage would help, because there are limitations to our level of participation in certain types of organizations based on our federal advisory rules and things like that. But we're moving out as often as we can in as many places as we can.
Super. So while we still have the microphone, since this concept involves new information exchanges and new cooperative separation procedures, what roles do you think that standards bodies, NSPs, and regulators have to make this real?
I believe that once we get to a more detailed concept with the type of information exchanges we need to make, both strategically and tactically. Now, tactically here is hours, I believe, because for many of these vehicles. Then I think we need to go to the standards bodies and use those as forums for performance of the information, but the formats and et cetera, we'll have to see whether one of our existing XMs will support this, or do we have to come up with something different? But it's really important for us to work through standards bodies so that people can use that as the basis for their development, for their networks, and for their interchanges. And we've done this, with promoting FIXM for flight information and AXM for aeronautical and WIXM for weather. We may now have I don't know what the acronym would be, but if they will have a new exchange model potentially for long-term intent, and especially since I don't think a standard separation is required here, since different vehicles have different characteristics. It really is, what is that critical area around the vehicle that we need to protect, and that has to clearly be in the exchange model also.
Any comment from other panelists on this panel? On this one, before I go to the Q&A session, the audience has been sending in questions. All right, looks like we are good to go to the audience and hear their questions and respond to them. I will give a summary of the questions that we have picked from the audience. The most prominent is, how will the various concepts of operations handle the state's occasionally requirement to operate in higher level airspace without sharing information with other users. Information and operational security for defense matters, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, Silas, I can speak to that a bit from what we've seen on the operational side. Obviously, states maintain the jurisdiction over their airspaces, and today in standard aviation, they operationalize that through partnerships with their air navigation service provider. So if a state aircraft has a prioritization to occupy a certain piece of the sky, they operationalize that through the FAA here in the United States, as an example. That model doesn't have to be different or unique for high altitude operations. We envision a system whereby states, particularly defense assets, can interrogate a collaborative traffic management system so they can receive a holistic, top to bottom situational awareness for their mission planning, and then plan their mission accordingly. And based on their own prioritization, if they say, okay, we can avoid that piece of sky, that's fine, then great. Then we as operators never see them. And we're totally happy with that. And that's not unique. If there was an Airbus 380 100 miles away, I don't need to see that either. So that in that way, that's not unique. But if the state determines, no, we actually need to be in that airspace in order to provide for the security of our population, then we move. There's no debate about that. I think the key is making sure that everyone has access to that system so they can smartly plan their missions accordingly.
Excellent. So as we move towards the end of our discussion, I request all the panelists to have a 2-second last second contribution. So we start with the alphabetic.
I just want to say thank you, and I really do believe it's going to be all about networking and sharing information in a secure manner.
Super. Next, Dragos.
I'd like to express my thanks and gratitude for allowing us to be part of this panel. I think it's been very interesting, and we consider this to be the first step in a very long journey together. Thank you.
David, go ahead. Hansel, go ahead.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with everyone today. Very much appreciate it, and we certainly do appreciate the forward-leaning efforts by regulators and ANSPs, such as in Rwanda, in the United States with the FAA, in Europe, and also in Australia, particularly with CASA and Air Services and their participation. It's been and continues to be an incredibly collaborative effort, and I'm looking forward to the future. Thank you.
Super. Mark, please go ahead.
Yes, just thanks a lot for everything, and to everybody. And just to recall that the RICO project will propose 3 workshops open to almost everybody. I mean, also the people who want to contribute in the coming 18 months. So there will be some opportunities to share information and to address every kind of topics.
Paolo, the floor is yours.
Thanks for the opportunity, Silas, and thanks for to share with those panelists of the high level. So we have a point of view of the state, how we can use this technology. So we have a lot of work to do besides. Thank you.
Excellent. So we now go towards the end of our session, and we are going to go into a summary. And here are some of the quick takeaways for today's discussion. It was very evident that implementation of higher airspace operations can establish communications in a reasonable amount of time to remote areas and communities, especially after natural disasters. A need for legal framework and support for the establishment of national legal instruments through collaboration and coordination with different government agencies is of paramount importance. And continuous conduct of workshops and consultative meetings between stakeholders so as to share new and innovative ideas pertaining to high airspace operations. it was very clear that a higher airspace operation needs to consider safe movement of vehicles as they transit from the higher airspace to the lower airspace in an orderly and sustainable manner. There is a need for international coordination between the higher airspace users. In closing of this session, we would like to thank the panelists for their time and participation in these lively discussions. We also thank ICAO, ATCA, and SESAR, and most importantly, the audience for their participation. I will now hand over to the organizers to close out the panel event. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Silas, and thank you very much for moderating this session. And like you said, thank you to the panelists for a really interesting discussion on what's going to be a really exciting topic for the future. So just to say, we are now moving to a break, and we have a global networking coffee, which is being co-organized with ACCA and ICAO. And for this, you have to switch to a different platform, which is being hosted on Remo. This is something which ACCA has set up. I participated yesterday in the Global Networking Coffee, and I must say it's a really interesting platform to use. You can enter the room. There are a large number of tables. You can look around the room, see who's there, see who's at which table, go and join a table and have a chat with those people, then jump to another table. So I really would recommend you try it out. As I say, it's a global networking coffee, so we'll have participants from all three of these events. It will run for 1 hour following this. Although I would also remind you that for those of you following the SESAR Innovation Days program, the next technical sessions start on the hour at 4 o'clock Central European time, so in half an hour. Anyway, with that, thank you all very much, and see you soon. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.